So, The Last of Us has a new faction, the Seraphites, a religious cult of madmen gutting and stringing up their victims. Hey everyone, my name is the iPad Cat, and in today's video, the first part of a two-part miniseries on the Seraphites, I'm going to try and summarize everything we know about them. A lot of the information / speculation will be coming from Reddit. I will credit the users who have more intricate theories, but not the people who are simply referring to interviews and simple obvious things in the trailers, because then I'd be here all day. Since this video is going to have a lot of information in it, it's going to be divided into parts, which you will hopefully see on screen now. But without further ado, let's get started. So, let's start with the basic stuff. Their name, the Seraphites, which all of us probably know by now. It may sound like a random fitting name for a cult, but there's actually more to it than that. Now, I'm not a religious person and I don't know a lot about religion, so don't kill me if I get anything I say wrong here. But Reddit user Matriarchal, sorry if I butchered that, pointed out that the name Seraphites is similar to a quote-unquote celestial or heavenly being found in Christianity, Judaism and Islam called a seraph, which means burning one. He or she then continues to go into more depth on these seraphims, but I even have a hard time understanding religious rhetoric in Swedish, even more so in English, so if you want, you can go find the post if you're interested in that kind of stuff. So now we know that the name of the cult literally, or not literally, but sort of, means burning one, which goes well with all the torches and burning cars. Moving on, let's talk a bit about their appearance. Every member of the cult wears the same outfit, some sort of heavy brown hooded coat. If this has something to do with their beliefs, it's unclear. But the coat is not all. Every female member seems to have the same braided hairstyle. And every male member is bald and has no beard. Yet again, we don't know if this has anything to do with their beliefs, but one would assume so, since they all have to wear it. Another interesting detail in the Seraphite cultists' appearance is the scars / markings on their cheeks. In the same post that I mentioned earlier by Matriarchal, he or she suggested that these scars could perhaps be quote-unquote wings. This is supported by the fact that the celestial or heavenly beings called seraphims I mentioned earlier apparently have wings covering their face. But what this means, other than that it further solidifies their connection to the seraphims, is hard to say. They are nested with sin. Breathe in, that they may know my love. You know this is sacrifice land. Wolf. Apostate. This is the type of language the Seraphites use. Reddit user PaxBanana0 suggested that the phrase, they are nested with sin, breathe in that they may know my love, could be connected to the book of Revelation in the New Testament in the Bible. He or she lists a somewhat similar quote. Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. The angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its ripes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia. What is described in the quote has some likeness to the way the Seraphites speak and how they perform their ritualistic sacrifices / executions. This suggests even more that the Seraphites is some sort of perverse cultish version of Christianity. Okay, so there's not much to say here, but one Reddit user by the name of Mijimo suggested that the Seraphites actually could be a matriarchal organization. If you don't know what that means, it's basically that mostly women are in a position of power. He or she pointed out in their post that Naughty Dog seems to be going with a theme of empowering women in The Last of Us Part 2, and that the PGW trailer seemed to suggest that women are the leaders in the cult. But I think that was just a coincidence that it happened to be a woman that was leading the ritual, because in the E3 demo we see a man doing it. But I do, however, agree with the theory. But what I think is the most telling that the Seraphites are in fact matriarchal is this propaganda poster. May she guide you, and a big picture of a woman. Now this woman is certainly important to the cult, otherwise she wouldn't be there. But is she a prophet? Their leader? Maybe their god? I'm afraid we won't get to know that until release, but nevertheless, whoever she is, I think she is the strongest evidence of the matriarchy in the cult. Now, it's unclear if the cult is a Doomsday cult or not. A Doomsday cult is basically a group of radically religious people who claim to some way or another know that the world is ending, and use that as the justification of any and all acts they commit. If you've played Far Cry 5, the cult there is a perfect example of a Doomsday cult. Every atrocity they commit is justified by the fact that it's best for everyone, and sacrifices have to be made in order to be prepared for the world's end. The Seraphites sacrifice people too, but we don't know for what reason. The only thing that could give us some slight indication as to why is the brute/mini-boss at the end of the gameplay demo who says to Ellie, "You know this is sacrifice land." So maybe they just sacrifice people who intrude on what they perceive as holy land. But come on, tell me a Doomsday cult wouldn't be the only cult in a The Last of Us scenario. The fact that they have been around since the outbreak, as revealed by Neil Druckmann in a Game Informer interview, could mean that they were created as the world was ending. But then again, if it already ended, why are they still around? So what role will the Seraphites have in the story of The Last of Us Part 2? Well, the one on everyone's minds is of course the theory on that the cult, in some way or another, commits the violent act that Neil Druckmann wrote in the blog post that accompanied the E3 demo, which would set Ellie out on her journey of retribution. And this has some merit, since we know that the gameplay takes place 5 years after the end of the first game, but the party in Jackson takes place only 4 years after it. We also have the named members of the cult, Lev, Yara and Emily. They will obviously have a part in the story as well. Well, maybe not Emily. In my video on what the two timelines could possibly be, I discussed how maybe Yara and Lev, who are confirmed to be deserters of the cult, could act as a window into the inner workings of the Seraphites. More on that in the video, which you can watch here. Many are also quick to jump the gun and consider the Seraphites the antagonists of the game. But think about this. The fireflies were viewed as the hope for humanity, and the good guys for almost the entirety of The Last of Us Part 1. But in the end, they became the bad guys. Well, at least depending on your perspective. Maybe the Seraphites are similar in that sense, but the other way around. Now, given that they literally got what seems to be innocent people, I think that's a difficult task to accomplish. But it's the naughty gods we're talking about here. Finally, we have a theory from a Reddit user by the name Raggedy Randall, which is slightly terrifying if you're a fan of Joel. He or she basically suggests that there might be a reason for Naughty Dog not showing Joel from the front. Maybe the Seraphites have branded or mutilated his face, or maybe he joined them and does have their scars. Well, technically if they had the scars we would be able to see them, but he could still have them on only one side of his face. Personally, I think this one is quite unlikely, but still interesting to think about. Anyways, those are just some things I've found while watching the trailers and scouring the internet for anything and everything I could find about the Seraphites. What do you think about the Seraphites? Did I miss anything? Tell me in the comments down below and let's discuss it. And until next time, have a great day.